I have lived alone for 9 years in a brick house outside Columbus. It is quiet and I like it that way. At 67, I no longer need noise or company. My son Mike knows this, but he moved back in last spring after losing his job. He said it would be temporary. Then came Emily, his young, polished wife with her bright hair and careful words. Everything about her feels practiced. Every smile looks like a performance. On the morning of October 12, 2021, I woke to the sound of her humming in my kitchen. When I came downstairs, she greeted me like we were friends. "Good morning, Linda. I made coffee for both of us, a special blend," she said, handing me a cup. The smell hit me first. It was not coffee, not the kind I have brewed for 40 years. There was a sharp chemical bite beneath the sweetness, something that burned faintly in the nose. I watched her pour cream into her own cup, then walked to the refrigerator for milk. My hand tightened around the handle. I do not know what made me do it, habit, instinct, or something deeper. But while her back was turned, I switched our cups. When she came back, smiling as always, I lifted mine and pretended to take a sip. "Delicious," I said. Her eyes flickered just for a second. "Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like if you've ever felt like no one believed you, not even the people closest to you." Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table, her smile fixed like paint that had not dried. She always dressed as if someone might photograph her. Silk blouse, hair brushed until it shone, perfume too strong for morning. I stirred my coffee slowly and kept my eyes on her hands. They never stopped moving. "Mike's got another interview today," she said lightly. "We're hoping this one will work out. It's at a real firm this time." "That is good," I said. My voice was even, but inside I was measuring her tone. Every word of hers carried a strange tension. Sweetness stretched too thin. She took another sip from her cup. I only pretended to drink mine, letting the rim brush my lips. The smell was sharper now, metallic almost. Something about it reminded me of the lab where we tested evidence back when I worked for the county prosecutor's office. Those mornings when I reviewed toxicology reports, the faint scent of ethanol rising from sealed vials. 20 minutes passed. Mike came into the kitchen, still adjusting his tie. "You two already started without me?" "There's more in the pot," Emily said cheerfully, setting down her cup. "It's that new blend from the market." He smiled and kissed her head. "You always make things nice, Em." She smiled back, but her lips trembled slightly. I noticed how her hand trembled when she lifted the cup again. A faint rash had started blooming across her neck, red blotches spreading fast. "Emily," I said quietly, "you look pale." She brushed a hand over her collarbone. "It's just the heat." But within seconds, she began coughing short, sharp bursts that bent her forward. The cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile. Mike dropped his briefcase and ran to her side. "Emily. Hey, what's wrong?" She gasped for air, clawing at her throat. The blotches deepened, climbing up her cheeks. I stood, my pulse steady but my mind already moving in the old patterns. "Assess, observe, document. Call an ambulance," I said. Mike fumbled for his phone, shouting into it, pacing like a man who needed to move to believe he was doing something. I stood beside the sink and watched the puddle of spilled coffee spread slowly across the floor. The smell of it was heavier now, chemical and sour. When the paramedics arrived, they found Emily half conscious, her breathing ragged. They worked quickly, attaching monitors and tubes. Mike followed them to the ambulance, shouting her name. I stayed behind, my hands flat on the counter, staring at the two cups. One stood empty, the other still full, the surface unbroken. I poured the untouched cup into a plastic container and sealed it. Old habits die hard. By late afternoon, I was sitting in the hospital waiting room when a doctor approached. He was young, kind-faced, and uncomfortable. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes. I'm Dr. Patel. We stabilized your daughter-in-law. She's conscious now." He paused before continuing. "The lab found traces of a toxin in her blood. It appears to have been ingested recently, within the last hour before she collapsed." Mike was behind him, pale and trembling. "What kind of toxin?" The doctor hesitated. "Something consistent with paraquat, used in industrial herbicides. It's not something one accidentally consumes." Mike turned to me, his face blank with confusion. "Mom, what, how?" I looked straight at the doctor. You are saying someone poisoned her coffee. That seems likely, he said carefully. When Emily woke, they let us in one at a time. I stood near the door while Mike sat beside her bed, holding her hand. Her eyes fluttered open. Her voice was hoarse. It was her. Mike blinked. What? Emily pointed at me with a trembling hand. She switched the cups. She did it. The words hung in the sterile air. Mike turned to me, stunned. Mom. I said nothing at first. I could feel the weight of decades pressing against my back. Courtrooms, witnesses, cross-examinations. I had built my life on evidence, not emotion. Finally, I said, that is not true. Emily's lips trembled. She hated me from the beginning. Mike's hand tightened around hers. Mom, please, what happened? I spoke clearly, like giving testimony. Emily brought the coffee. It had an unusual smell. When she stepped away, I switched the cups because I did not trust what I smelled. I never drank mine. She drank hers. You can check for prints. You will find both our fingerprints on the cups, but only her saliva in the one she used. Emily shook her head weakly. She's lying. The doctor looked between us, uneasy. Detectives will need to speak with all of you. I nodded. Of course. That night, after Mike drove home for a change of clothes, I sat alone in the hospital parking lot. The air was cold. My hands ached. I looked at the sealed container in my purse, the one holding the coffee she had meant for me. I had written the time and date across the label, 10:42 a.m. October 12th. I knew then what I was up against. Not just a frightened young woman with two bright eyes. Something colder, practiced, deliberate. When I turned the key in the ignition, I told myself one quiet truth. I had spent my life proving guilt. This time I would have to prove innocence, my own. The next morning, a sharp knock pulled me out of sleep. It was 6:37 a.m. Too early for anything but trouble. Through the glass I saw the outline of a uniform. Detective Harris. We had met years ago, back when I gave lectures to young officers about procedure and ethics. Now he stood at my door with that same weary, knowing look men wear when they already think they have their suspect. He stepped into my kitchen and glanced around. I had left everything untouched since the day before. The cups, the stains, even the smell. He sat at the table, pulled out a small notebook, and began in a measured voice. You were at St. Luke's Hospital yesterday, Mrs. Carter? Yes, I said. Your daughter-in-law identified you as the person who poisoned her. I'm aware. Would you like to tell me what happened? I told him everything, the sharp smell, the switch, the untouched cup sealed in a plastic container. When I finished, I handed him the evidence. That should still contain what she drank, I said. He studied it, then looked up. You sound awfully calm for someone accused of attempted murder. I was a prosecutor for 27 years, I said. Panic never helped anyone. He gave a short, humorless smile. You understand how this looks, right? I do. But looks are not facts. He jotted a few notes. Your son says Emily never handled chemicals. You, on the other hand, worked with them for years. Knowledge is not possession, I said. You can search every cabinet in this house. You will not find paraquat. He closed his notebook. We'll be doing that. There'll be a search tomorrow morning. After he left, I stood by the window watching the gray light creep across the yard. The garden looked washed out after the night rain. On the table were two faint coffee rings that the crime techs had missed, like the outline of everything I was about to lose. By noon, a patrol car parked across the street and stayed there all day. My phone rang again and again, old colleagues, neighbors, cautious voices trying to sound casual. They all wanted to hear me say it was a mistake. I said the words, though even to my own ears they sounded thin. That evening Mike came home. He didn't sit down. He just stood in the doorway like a man afraid of contaminating a crime scene. Mom, he said. They're coming tomorrow morning. With a warrant. I know. Emily's still in the hospital. They said it was close. She chose her cup, I said evenly. He looked at me as if seeing a stranger. Why would she lie? I don't know. But something was wrong yesterday and you saw it. He hesitated. They found a bottle in the trash, herbicide. From the shed. I turned toward him. Who found it? The officers. They said the seal looked new. It wasn't. I used that months ago. It was sealed and stored. He rubbed the back of his neck. I might have been in the shed a few nights ago. I needed tools. Was Emily with you? He paused too long. No. I studied his face. If someone wants me accused, they only need access. Don't help them. He flinched. She's my wife. Exactly, I said quietly. And she knows how loyal you are. He didn't answer. When he left, the door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I didn't sleep. At dawn I made tea and laid out my old case files, as if logic might protect me. The pattern was simple: motive means opportunity. Emily had all three. I had age and suspicion. That was enough for a jury. At 8:04 a.m. The knock came again, louder this time. Search warrant. I opened the door before they could shout twice. Harris and 2 officers came in, all business. They searched every room, every cabinet, the basement, the shed. I stayed silent, watching. When they asked for the safe code, I gave it. Inside were only documents and my husband's old revolver, unloaded. After 2 hours, Harris closed his notebook. You know we have to be thorough, he said. I know, I replied. And I also know how easily things can be arranged. He looked up. You think someone planted evidence? I think someone wants a conviction more than the truth. He studied me for a moment. You still have that front door camera? Yes. Check it before we collect the drive. Sometimes people forget what their own houses see. After they left, the silence pressed against the walls. I turned on my laptop, opened the footage and let it play. For an hour, nothing. Then at 1:13 a.m., the motion sensor triggered. Mike appeared in the frame. Gray hoodie, head down. He unlocked the back door with his own key and slipped inside. 58 minutes later, he left, glancing over his shoulder twice before vanishing into the dark. I watched the clip again and again. The evidence was clear, the conclusion unbearable. My son had been here the night before the search. For years I had told juries that truth waits quietly beneath lies, patient and steady. Now I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the truth that could destroy me. Someone had planted evidence. Someone with my trust, my key, and my blood. And that someone was my son. I watched the clip of Mike slipping into my house at 1:13 a.m. until the pixels felt like gravel in my eyes. Gray hoodie, quick look over the shoulder, the small hitch in his walk from the soccer injury he had at 14. He stayed 58 minutes. When he left, he locked the door behind him like a good son, then glanced up at the camera as if listening for something. He had told me he was with Emily at the hospital all night. That was not true. I exported the file, set a write protect flag, and saved 3 copies: desktop, encrypted drive, and cloud, each labeled with the exact time down to the second. I printed 2 still frames and wrote the chain of custody on the back in blue ink, the way I had taught young assistants to do. Date October 13, 2021. Time 1 hour 13 minutes and 27 seconds to 2 hours 11 minutes and 41 seconds. Source: front door ring, handler L. Carter. Procedure steadied my hands. Procedure was the only friend I had left. I opened the porch camera too. At 2:19 a.m., the motion sensor caught the recycle bin lid lifted and lowered. No face, only hands and nitrile gloves, the kind we all kept around during the pandemic. The gloves were blue. The sleeves were gray. The video did not lie. It also did not accuse. It simply sat there, waiting for someone to read it. I went to the shed at first light. The latch hung slightly crooked. On the workbench, the row of mason jars I used for screws had been nudged out of line by a 1/4 inch, the sort of misalignment that shouts to a person who lives alone. The empty herbicide bottle was gone. In the trash behind the garage, I found a torn strip of plastic wrap and a stray twist tie that did not belong to anything I buy. I put both in a sandwich bag, wrote the time, sealed it, and placed it in the freezer. Evidence keeps better there. The weight of what I knew did not arrive all at once. It came in small, measurable increments, data, images, timestamps, until the mind could not deny the shape they made. Someone had been here. Someone I loved had moved things, touched things, manufactured a story for the men who would return with boxes and labels. I had told juries for years that intention leaves a fingerprint. I could feel it on my kitchen table. I made coffee the old way, boiling water in a dented kettle, measuring grounds with the spoon my husband used before the cancer. I stood at the sink and looked out at the fence that needed mending. Mike had promised to fix it in June. I had paid his car insurance in July, $148.12, because he said he could not cover it. In August, when his unemployment ran out, I moved $500 into his checking account and told him not to worry. There is a peculiar silence that follows generosity when it is not returned. I had been living inside that silence for months. My phone buzzed with hospital updates and nothing from my son. I checked my banking app. At 2:46 a.m. While Mike was not in my house according to him, someone tried my password from our home IP address and mistyped it twice. The security alert sat in my inbox with the bland cheerfulness of an automated robot. I printed it and added it to the folder on the counter. The folder was growing. At 9:15 a.m., Mike texted, "They're asking for your devices. Cooperate." No question mark, no greeting. I typed and erased a dozen responses, then put the phone face down. I had taught him to say please. Somewhere along the line that slipped away. I sat on the edge of his old bed and let the room tell me what it could. The baseball pennant still hung above the dresser. The new duffel bag lay open on the floor. On the nightstand, a pharmacy bag from a downtown clinic I did not recognize, receipt stapled to the side. October 11, 2021, 6:22 p.m. Cash $28.99. Disposable gloves. In the closet, his suit jacket from the interview draped on a hanger, pockets empty except for an ATM slip. Withdrawal $200. October 12, 2021, 12:04 a.m. Station kiosk on Broad. Accuracy is a comfort to me. I photographed each item with the date stamp on, then put them back exactly as I found them. Downstairs, I replayed the conversation with Detective Harris in my mind. He had given me that neutral warning about my own cameras. He had seen too many houses tell on their owners. I wondered if he would choose to see what my house was saying now. At 11:30, the landline rang. Emily's voice came through thin and papery from the hospital. "Mike says you are upset," she said, small and careful. "I hope you know I forgive you for the mix-up with the coffee." "Do you?" I said. There was a gentle sigh. "I understand grief. It makes people do strange things." "What grief is that?" "The grief of losing a son," she said. "Because after this, you will." "Put a nurse on the line," I said. "Verify your call is authorized." A pause, then the click of a polite disconnect. Small mistakes matter. Patients do not place casual calls from monitored units, while detectives wait for statements. Her call was a message, not a conversation. The patrol car across the street idled through lunch. I ignored it and kept working. I drafted a timeline in a spiral notebook listing each entry in block letters. October 12, 10:42 a.m. Sealed cup, 12:07 p.m. Ambulance, 4:15 p.m. Dr. Patel, consistent with Paraquat, 7:23 p.m. Mike States All-Night Hospital, October 13, 1:13 a.m. Video, Mike enters, 2:19 a.m. Bin lid, 2:46 a.m. Password alert, 9:15 a.m. Text, cooperate. I left a line after each fact, the way I used to leave room for rebuttal. I had one more thing to check. 2 houses down, Mrs. Alvarez kept a porch camera that covered a sliver of my driveway. I had helped her with a municipal tax appeal last year. She owed me a favor. I walked over with a plate of scones I did not want and asked if she could share last night's footage. She clicked through with the cheerful focus of a woman who loves gadgets. At 2:22 a.m. Her camera caught the hood of a dark sedan nose into my drive. Lights off, engine running. At 2:31, the sedan rolled away without a license plate visible. I asked her to email me the file. She did. When I returned, Mike was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, the smell of his aftershave mixing with the old coffee. He looked up with a face I could barely recognize, young, frightened, already defensive. "Mom," he said too loud. "They're coming back for your laptop." "I saved them the trouble," I said. "It is on the table." He rubbed his palms on his jeans. "Emily asked if we can just get through this without making it worse." "How much worse would you like it?" I asked, then accusing me of attempted murder. He swallowed hard. "They found a bottle. They think. I know what they think." I slid the printed stills across the table. This is last night at 1:13 a.m. He looked then looked away. I came to get a clean shirt. You stayed 58 minutes. I fell asleep on the couch. You wore gloves at the recycle bin, I said. You also tried my bank password at 2:46 a.m. His eyes flared. How do you even? I read what is in front of me. You taught me that when you were 8 and hid your report card behind the radiator. He pressed both hands to his face and spoke through his fingers. She said you hate her. She said you would frame her. She said that before or after she brewed the coffee. His hands dropped. Stop talking like that. Tell me the truth, I said. Were you here alone? He stared at the floor so long the clock over the stove ticked 12 times. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin. She asked me to help. She said the police always go after the person with the most knowledge. She said you would be fine if it looked like you were careless. She said it would end faster. There it was, the hinge on which the door swung open and slammed shut. Help. Careless. End faster. Words that erase responsibility and call it love. She is going to ruin you, I said. She loves me, he whispered. She loves outcomes, I said. There is a difference. He backed toward the hallway, searching for a place where the facts would not follow him. I did not move. The truth between us had finally stripped off its polite clothes and stood plain. When the knock came again, polite this time, not official, Mike flinched. I opened the door. A courier in a red jacket handed me an envelope addressed in neat block letters. Linda Carter. Inside was a typed note with no letterhead. Consent to search, personal effects, with a sticky flag on the signature line. No return address, no explanation. Someone was trying to make me sign away what little protection remained. I set the consent on the counter and picked up my pen. I did not sign. I wrote across the top, in the same blue ink I had used for decades, declined. Then I dated it. October 13, 2021, 12:22 p.m. I looked at my son. From this moment, I said evenly, we deal in facts. He stood very still, and the boy I had raised flickered once behind the frightened man. Then he nodded, a small broken gesture that did not change what he had done. Trust did not shatter with a dramatic sound. It thinned the way ice thins in spring, silently, until the next step sends you through. I had taken that step. There was water everywhere, cold and honest. By late afternoon, the walls of my house felt smaller, as if the air itself were closing in. The patrol car outside had not moved all day. Each time I glanced through the blinds, the young officer behind the wheel looked away quickly, pretending to study something on his tablet. I knew that look. Surveillance disguised as routine. Observation dressed up as concern. I packed a small leather bag with my laptop, the copies of the camera footage, and the notebook where I had logged every detail, the coffee, the bottle, the call, the timestamps. I left the house quietly, locking both doors behind me. The patrol car's headlights flicked on as I turned the corner. I did not go home that night. Victor Wallace lived 40 miles north, in a house that looked like it had been carved out of time. A porch sagged slightly to one side, and a collection of wind chimes hung from the eaves, making soft metallic sounds in the cold air. He had been my mentor once, senior prosecutor, widower, a man who carried truth like a burden he refused to set down. After he retired, he moved to this quiet place by the lake. We had spoken occasionally since then, but never about anything personal. When I pulled into his gravel drive, the porch light came on. He opened the door before I could knock. Linda, he said, his voice low and steady. I heard. Then you know I did not do it. He looked at me for a long moment, the way a surgeon studies an X-ray before cutting. Come inside, he said finally. The living room smelled faintly of old books and pine wood. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, but the warmth did not reach the part of me that had been cold since that morning. Victor poured coffee, the safe kind, black and bitter, and sat opposite me at the heavy oak table he used as a desk. Tell me everything, he said. I did. From the first smell of the coffee to the note the courier brought. I laid out the printed photographs, the USB drive, the paper with declined written across the top. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he reached for the drive and plugged it into his laptop. The screen flickered, showing the footage of Mike entering the house. He watched in silence until it ended. Your son was there, he said quietly. Yes. And you believe Emily put him up to it? I do not believe, I said. I know. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pencil against his knee. You always were precise. It's good. You'll need that now. What I need is proof that will stand in court. He nodded slowly. We can start with her. Emily Ross. Or rather, whatever her real name is. I frowned. What do you mean? He turned his screen toward me. I ran a search this morning after the news alert. I don't like coincidences, and I remembered that face from a case years back, different name, different state. Took a while, but the patterns match. Marriages, inheritances, sudden deaths. She's been someone else twice before. I leaned closer. You are certain? As certain as I can be without fingerprints. Her first alias was Emily Sanders, then Emily Lawson. Each time she married a man with assets. Both died within 3 years, one from a fall, one from a gas leak. Both estates transferred to her before she disappeared. Total inheritance. Around $600,000. My hands tightened around the edge of the table. And now she's married my son. Victor nodded. Your husband's insurance left him what, $7 million? 7.2, I said quietly. Then you're looking at her next pattern. The silence stretched between us, heavy and exact. In my mind, the pieces began to slide into place like tiles in a mosaic. The sudden charm, the carefully sweet gestures, the way she always offered to handle Mike's job applications and financial papers. The smell of the coffee, the hospital call, the courier note. Every action now had a reason, and the reason was money. She wanted me out of the way, I said. Victor's eyes narrowed. And she used him to do it. I felt something sharp and final settle inside me. A clarity I had not felt in years. The mother in me wanted to grieve. The prosecutor in me began to plan. What do we do first? I asked. He reached for a legal pad. We build a case the same way we always did. We document, verify, and control the narrative before they do. If she used false identities, there will be digital trails, bank accounts, marriage records, license renewals. I'll start those searches tonight. You focus on direct evidence. Which is anything that ties her words to intent. Calls, messages, conversations. She's confident now. That's when people talk too much. I nodded slowly. I can get that. He looked up. Careful, Linda. She's dangerous and she's cornered. I have lived my entire life surrounded by men who lied under oath, I said. I know what danger smells like. It smells like that coffee. Victor's expression softened for the first time. You always did have good instincts. Outside, the lake wind rattled the windows. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the air like tiny warnings. I felt steady for the first time in days. Before I left, Victor printed a file and slid it across the table. It contained copies of 2 old marriage certificates, both with Emily's photograph under different names. At the bottom, he had written the dates of the husband's deaths, each marked accidental. I folded the pages carefully and slipped them into my bag. This is enough to open the door, I said. Not yet, he warned. It's enough to get her attention. Be ready for that. When I drove home, night had already settled over the fields. The patrol car was gone. The house stood dark and silent, but the front gate was open. I parked a block away and approached on foot. My motion lights did not come on. Someone had turned them off at the switch. I unlocked the door quietly and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of perfume, hers. I moved through the house room by room. Nothing looked disturbed, but absence itself can be a disturbance. On the kitchen counter lay a small object that had not been there before. A single gold earring shaped like a teardrop. I picked it up with a paper towel and sealed it in a plastic bag. The evidence folder was now almost full. Upstairs, I sat at my desk, opened Victor's file again and read the names. Emily Sanders, married 2014, widowed 2017. Emily Lawson, married 2018, widowed 2020. Emily Ross, married 2020, alive and rehearsed. The pattern was perfect. Until now. I turned on my recorder and spoke aloud, my voice calm, each word measured. This is Linda Carter. October 13, 2021. Subject: Investigation into Emily Ross, also known as Sanders and Lawson. Objective: Proof of intent to defraud and attempted homicide. Beginning documentation. I pressed stop and placed the recorder beside the sealed bag with the earring. Then I looked out the window toward the dark street. Somewhere beyond that darkness, Emily was moving her pieces. But I had just placed mine. The following morning I woke before dawn. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels watched. I dressed without turning on the main lights, poured coffee that I brewed myself, and sat at the table reading through Victor's notes again. His handwriting was the same as ever, sharp, deliberate, a prosecutor's hand. I underlined the phrase pattern of inheritance, then drew a small square beside it, the old habit of marking points that could convict. At 7:12 a.m. I called Victor. He answered on the first ring. I checked the registries, he said without preamble. Your Emily never existed before 2020. No birth record, no school history. Everything she has is built on forged IDs. I found a social security number tied to a woman who died in 2012. I let that sink in. Then it is over. Not yet, he said. We need her voice. Something direct. The past marriages help us, but the police will not reopen them without hard proof that she intended to repeat the pattern. I can get it, I said. Linda, don't take risks alone. Risk is already here, I replied. After we hung up, I sat still for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum. The next steps were clear. I needed her words, something that would place both her and Mike inside their plan. Words have weight when spoken without fear. I knew Emily's rhythm by now. She spoke most freely when she believed she had already won. At 10 o'clock I saw Mike's car pull up outside. He came in quietly, holding his phone like a shield. She's home from the hospital, he said. They're asking questions. She wants to talk to you. Does she? I said. She said it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe we can fix it if we meet. Where? At the house, he said, meaning mine. She's afraid to go anywhere public. I nodded slowly, careful not to let relief or suspicion show. All right, I said. This afternoon. When he left, I set up the recorder on the windowsill behind the curtain, an old digital model from my days in court prep. I tested it twice. The red light blinked steadily. The microphone picked up the creak of the back door and the rustle of leaves outside. I left the window crack just enough for sound. Then I waited. They arrived at 3:11 p.m. Emily walked ahead of him, pale but composed, her movements slow, measured. She wore the same perfume that lingered in my kitchen last night. I stayed hidden in the den while they entered through the back door. The recorder caught every word. Her voice was clear, low, controlled. 7 million, Mike. That is what your mother keeps sitting in that account. You think she will ever give it to you while she is alive? She's not like that, he said weakly. She's just careful. She's selfish, Emily snapped. She'll live another 20 years just to watch you struggle. We deserve better than that. You said yourself you were tired of begging. He hesitated. You told me it wouldn't go this far. It had to, she said. No one was supposed to get hurt. The dose was small, just enough to make her sick, to bring sympathy, to make her look unstable. She ruined that when she switched the cups. Mike's voice cracked. Stop talking like that. You wanted the life insurance, she pressed. You wanted a house. This is the only way. Once she's out of the picture, everything moves to you. There was a long pause. Then his voice came small, broken. It went wrong, Emily. She laughed softly. Nothing went wrong. She will be the one in court, not us. A scrape of chair legs, then footsteps. Mike, she said sharply. What's that noise? They had heard something. Perhaps the faint click of my phone recording as a backup. I backed away from the window, heart steady, steps light. I had what I needed. Through the narrow crack in the curtain, I saw her lift her purse from the table. A glint of metal flashed as she reached inside. My mind registered it before fear had time to form. A gun. Small, silver, compact, the kind you buy from people who do not ask for permits. Mike's voice rose in panic. What are you doing? She was here, Emily hissed. Someone was listening. That was my cue. I slipped out the front door, keeping low behind the hydrangea bushes. My car keys felt slippery in my hand, but the old instincts guided me. Quiet, quick, deliberate. I started the engine, reversed down the drive, and did not stop until the house was a shrinking rectangle in the mirror. I drove straight to Victor's. He opened the door before I could knock, reading everything on my face without words. "You got it?" he asked. I handed him the recorder and the phone. "Every word," I said. He connected the devices, downloaded the files, and played the first few seconds. Emily's voice filled the room, crisp and damning. 7 million. Your mother keeps sitting in that account. He stopped the playback and looked at me. "That's more than enough." "She had a gun," I said quietly. He frowned. "Did she see you?" "Maybe. It does not matter now." He poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. "This is evidence of conspiracy and attempted homicide. We go to the district attorney tonight." I nodded, feeling the exhaustion reach my bones. "I will testify," I said. "You always did." We drove downtown together as dusk settled. Victor insisted on driving. His old sedan smelled of leather and cold coffee. I sat in the passenger seat with the evidence folder on my lap, my fingers resting on it as if to keep it alive. At the courthouse, the night clerk recognized him immediately. We were led into a small conference room with beige walls and flickering lights. Victor spoke first, explaining the case, the false identities, the recorded conversation. When the DA's assistant played the file, the room went completely still. Emily's voice was clear, unshaken, confident, until the end, when the sound of the chair scraping and her sudden fear broke the pattern. When it ended, the assistant looked up slowly. "We'll issue a warrant tonight," she said. "Both of them." Victor nodded. "Linda will be our primary witness." The woman turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, I know this is difficult." "No," I said. "It is necessary." We left the courthouse after midnight. The city was quiet, the air damp and cold. In the reflection of the courthouse glass, I saw myself, tired, older but intact. I had been accused, betrayed, nearly erased. But I had stayed methodical, step by step. Victor turned to me as we reached the car. "You know what you've done, don't you?" "Yes," I said. "I've taken my money off the table." He smiled faintly. "That's how you win." The night wind carried the sound of the lake in the distance. Steady, relentless, washing everything clean. I knew the storm would come next. The arrests, the hearings, the endless questions. But for the first time in months, I was not afraid of the noise. Truth, once spoken aloud, makes its own kind of quiet. The hearings began in late December, after weeks of quiet preparation. The newspapers called it the Carter poisoning case, as if my name itself were the scandal. I attended every session in a navy coat and the same pearl earrings I had worn at my husband's memorial. Routine gave me strength. Facts gave me air. Emily and Mike sat together at the defense table, though they no longer touched. She looked smaller without her performance, hair duller, eyes restless, lips pressed thin. Mike avoided my gaze. When he finally looked up, it was with the expression of a boy waiting for punishment he no longer understood. The prosecution called me first. I swore the oath, raised my right hand, and felt the familiar weight of testimony settle over me like a second skin. The courtroom lights were bright, and the recorder on the clerk's table blinked red, steady as a heartbeat. I began from the beginning. The smell of the coffee, the switch, the fall to the floor. Every detail in order. The assistant district attorney guided me gently through the evidence. My container, the recordings, Victor's documentation. When she played the audio, Emily's voice filled the room, calm and confident. 7 million. Your mother keeps sitting in that account. The sound made the jurors go still. You could hear paper rustle, someone clear a throat, then silence again. The tape continued. No one was supposed to get hurt. The dose was small. She ruined that when she switched the cups. When it ended, the AD asked softly, "Mrs. Carter, whose voices are these?" "Emily Ross," I said. "And my son, Michael Carter." Mike flinched like the words themselves had struck him. The defense tried to discredit me, of course. They said I had tampered with evidence, that the recording was manipulated, that grief had made me vengeful. I answered each accusation with the same calm I once used in court. Dates, times, verifiable steps. I let the facts speak because emotion would only weaken them. When they brought up my career as a prosecutor, implying I knew how to stage a case, I said, "Yes. I know exactly how evidence is built. That is why I documented mine." The judge, a woman younger than my own son, watched me closely. She had that sharp stillness I recognized from my own years at trial, someone who understood what truth costs. The second day belonged to the detectives. Harris took the stand, his voice steady. He confirmed the surveillance footage, the timestamps, the chain of custody. Then Victor testified, outlining Emily's false identities and the inheritance trail. He presented the marriage certificates, the death reports, the forged IDs. Each line of paper added another brick to the wall around her. Emily's composure cracked during his testimony. Her jaw trembled. She whispered something to her attorney and shook her head. When the prosecutor played the recording again, this time focusing on her final words, "She'll be the one in court, not us," Emily buried her face in her hands. Mike's testimony came last. He looked thinner, his voice small. Under oath, he admitted that he had entered my house that night, that Emily had convinced him it was necessary to protect her. The phrase hung there like smoke. He said she told him I had lost touch with reality, that I kept chemicals for control. He believed her. That belief had become a weapon. When cross-examined, he broke down. "She said it would end faster," he murmured. "She said Mom wouldn't suffer." I sat motionless. There are moments when forgiveness feels like air. You know it exists, but you cannot yet breathe it. When closing arguments ended, the judge dismissed the jury for deliberation. I waited in the hallway with Victor. The courthouse smelled of coffee and disinfectant. My hands shook for the first time since the beginning. "They will convict," Victor said quietly. "The evidence is airtight." "I know," I whispered. "It just doesn't feel like victory." After 4 hours, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. The words sounded almost gentle after months of tension. Emily was sentenced to life imprisonment. Mike received 18 years for his role in the conspiracy. The judge's voice did not waver when she said, "You both tried to destroy the woman who gave you everything." The gavel fell. I did not cry. I watched them lead my son away in handcuffs, head bowed, lips moving soundlessly. Emily followed, her face pale, eyes fixed on the floor. The silence in the courtroom was the kind that lives after explosions. A void, deep and irreversible. Victor placed a hand on my arm. "It's over," he said. I shook my head slowly. "No. It survived." Outside, the winter air was sharp, the courthouse steps slick with ice. Reporters waited at the bottom, shouting questions. I kept walking. My voice, when it came, was clear and even. Justice is not vengeance. It is protection. I reached my car and sat for a long time, watching the last of the daylight fade. Somewhere beyond those walls, my son was sitting in a cell, and Emily was cataloging her next version of herself. I could not save him from the choices he made. But I had saved myself from the life they wanted for me. One without truth, without boundary. As I started the engine, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. The road home was long, but it was mine. A year passed in a steady, ordinary way that felt like mercy. On October 12, 2022, I woke to a quiet house, brewed my own coffee, and stepped onto the porch with a sweater over my shoulders. The maple in the front yard had turned the exact red of my husband's old flannel. The patrol car was long gone, the neighbors waved again, and the only sound on my street was a mail truck easing its way from box to box. I fixed the fence Mike had promised to mend. A new cedar rail, set level with a small bubble in a plastic vial. I liked the certainty of it. Posts anchored at 36 inches. Concrete mixed at a 2-to-1 ratio. Every measurement a small oath kept. I paid the hardware bill in cash. $41.78, and wrote the amount in my notebook not because I needed to, but because I like seeing numbers that matched reality. On Saturdays I went to the market for apples and eggs and whatever the old man with the honey stand had in season. He liked to tell me which jars were from clover and which from wildflower. I listened because simple facts, plainly stated, had become a comfort. In the afternoons I taught a free seminar at the high school, telling truth from story, for the seniors who wanted to hear it. I showed them what timestamps mean, how chain of custody works, why a neat narrative is not evidence. I told them that love is not money and that respect lives where boundaries are drawn clearly. When they asked for a single phrase to remember, I gave them mine. "My money is off the table," I said. "If you need the person more than the purchase, you will keep both." The letters from my son began in January, one each month, postmarked from the state facility an hour away. He wrote in a tight, careful hand as if neatness could make his words truer. He apologized in circles. He asked for forgiveness without naming all the things he wanted forgiven. He told me about a GED tutor he liked, the way winter light fell across the yard at 4:10 p.m. The smell of bleach on laundry day. I stacked the letters face down in the bottom drawer of my desk. I did not answer. Silence can be a boundary. It was mine. I would not spend more of my life explaining facts to a man who had used them to break me. There are debts that time can settle and others it cannot. Emily did not write. I read her name in a court update when she lost her second appeal. Life imprisonment stood as cleanly as a stone. There was no joy in it. There was only the relief of a door closed and latched. Victor came by on Sundays. He brought legal pads and crooked scones that he pretended were intentional. We took our tea by the back window and watched the light move across the garden beds. Conversation with him arrived in small, exact pieces. He told me about a law review article that got the rule of evidence wrong. I told him the hydrangeas needed more shade. After he left, I rinsed the cups and set them upside down on a clean towel. For a minute, I would let the steam rise around my hands and imagine that time itself could be washed and set to dry. Money stopped leaving my account without a return route. I called the bank in March and removed every old link. No more automatic transfers, no shared credentials, no keys that turned the wrong locks. I met with a trust attorney and rewrote my will in language that would not bend in anyone's mouth. The core clause was one sentence long. No distribution shall be made to any person who has attempted to coerce, manipulate, or defraud the grantor. All such attempts shall disinherit the actor in full. The lawyer read it twice and nodded. Clear, he said. I initialed each page in blue ink the way I always had. Sometimes, near dusk, I drove to the lake by Victor's Road and sat in the pull-off where the willow leans toward the water. I kept the windows up and listened to the small slap of waves against stone. The lake sounded like a metronome, keeping time for a life that had finally returned to its own tempo. On the passenger seat, my canvas bag held a paperback, a pen, and the old recorder. I never turned it on. I did not need more voices. I needed the quiet. In July, I painted the kitchen a clean, sensible white and replaced the blinds that had hidden too much. I put the evidence folder, the one labeled October 2021, on the highest shelf of the hall closet, behind the winter quilts. It stayed there like a book I had finished. I did not open it, not even to straighten the labels. There are truths you only need to prove once. A few times a year, the state sent statements that listed numbers in narrow columns. Restitution, court costs, balances. I filed them without comment. I no longer recited the case to myself. I did not relive the hospital or the search, or the words spoken into my own window. Memory is not a place to live. It is a file you keep for when someone insists there was no fire and you still smell the smoke. On the anniversary, I boiled water at 10:42 a.m. On purpose. The kettle sang. I chose my own mug and my own bag of tea and stood at the counter where the 2 rings from that morning had stained the wood. I touched the varnish. It was smooth now, sanded and sealed. I poured and waited and did the small things the way I meant to: stir, breathe, hold. I do not pretend I am the same woman. I am quieter. I am firmer. I am less interested in explanations and more interested in doors that lock. I do not apologize for the shape of my life. I tend the garden. I shovel the walk. I answer when people speak to me and I decline when they ask for what does not belong to them. I am polite. I am final. At night, when the air turns cold, I stack wood in the fireplace, strike a match, and watch the flame catch and settle to a steady burn. I sit in the chair by the window with a wool blanket over my knees and listen to the house. It does not creak with someone else's footstep anymore. It breathes evenly. It keeps my secrets without asking for pay. Sometimes Victor calls after dinner and says nothing for a long time. I do not fill the silence. He does not either. We sit on our separate lines with the same lake wind between us, and when we finally speak, it is about practical things: the price of salt, the angle of winter sun, the new girl in my class who asks good questions. When he hangs up, I set the phone on the table and look at the kettle, the one that taught me to pay attention. My daughter-in-law poured me coffee with a strange smell. I decided to switch our cups. It is not a dramatic line. It is not poetry. It is a choice in the space of a breath. Saved my life. It showed me who I was. It taught me the sentence that keeps my peace. My money is off the table. The garden sleeps and wakes. The lake keeps time. The fire holds its small circle of light. I lock the doors I own and open the ones I choose. I am not a victim. I survived.